Today we're going to talk through how we came up with an idea for a high-level Dungeons & Dragons campaign. A campaign which sees a party of souped-up neo-deities killing their own creator and god. We came up with this idea while creating a parchment world map, but the map making has its own video which came out last week. This map making basis is rather important though as context, because this campaign idea was spawned into being rather incidentally. We were really just aiming to create some lore to match our map. And the focus of this video is to talk about the campaign, sure, but it's also to show how these ideas can grow and develop and be built upon even when it's not really your intention. So let's look at the very first instance that all of this would blossom from. But for possible lore, yeah, we can have it maybe in a situation where these were islands at one point and all these land bridges were created by maybe some like incredibly powerful druids or just magic users, or maybe just done with hand. Just some incredibly powerful monarchs or authoritarian government asked the people to dig out these lakes and move the land so they could connect to the islands. There we go. We're getting some, you know what? Putting it down. Let's get our first bit of lore. This mention of high-powered druids and authoritarian figures would quickly become comboed together, and we'd have the creator and god of this world be an authoritarian druidic god. To help us figure out the specifics of this, we'd pencil in a couple of options for our god. The first option would have their trajectory go from regular person back in the day to someone who's ascended to the level of godhood across their lifetime, even living in the world and being a character the players can meet. The second option was making the god an incredibly powerful celestial being who has been given this portion of the world to create and shape it however they please. We'd go with option 2 and very much develop this idea by just talking through it. I think maybe option 2 is what I'm leaning towards a little bit, because I feel like on a personal, I feel like I've done option 1 maybe a little bit more. And I'm thinking that I'm liking the idea of like this being a world where a god has been given this portion of the world, they've created this continent, and they're maybe a bit more childish or immature type of god. They're not this sort of like all-powerful, all-knowing god. And they very much treat this continent and the politics of it and the cultures of it and everything like that as like things that they can create and destroy and play with. And, you know, the people of this land have to like appease them, not because the god is sort of punitive, but because if the god gets disinterested with their way of life, they know that they might be like sort of wiped out, or at least like forced to change or something like that. And this can be sort of more even like a childlike god, a young god who acts like a child, who when they get bored of their toys just sort of scraps it, destroys them and starts again, and doesn't necessarily have the full mental faculties, or at least doesn't believe that the people living here are sentient and have full lives because they created them. And they're just like, well, you're not on the same level as me intellectually, so your existence is merely just something I created to amuse myself. That could be like an interesting dynamic. I think that's what we're going to go for. With this child god rule in mind, it also made sense to me for this to be a setting for a higher level campaign. I think what I'm also mentioning would lead to like a more high fantasy setting, because if it's say like a kid god just making decisions and deciding to do things, then maybe they just give like some of the people in the world like outrageous powers, because they're just like, oh, I think it would be fun if there's like there was like a superhero level or like a super highly magic ability. And same thing with even like martial characters, like or fighters. They're like, this person is like the strongest person in the world, and they're just like cracked level strong. Or they just give people like immortality at a whim because they just think that would be fun to have. So when they like force Mountain Nation to go against Lake Nation, they were like, yeah, it would be fun if like it was 20 immortal fighters versus, you know, 60,000 trained soldiers. And that's just how they operate this world. It's just by giving people dumb, fantastical powers just to amuse themselves. At this point, most of this would simply be lore, the set dressing for this map. But as we continue discussing the impacts having a child god use your world as their own personal play toy, the more I thought of this as possible inspiration for a campaign. If most of the world is just like basically like a play pit for a child's god who's just messing around with them, a great group that could be perfect for a party, for a campaign, is basically like god killers. Like a group of like super high level players. This would be perfect for like a level 18, 19, 20 campaign, who have basically like congregated together and are like gonna try and kill this god. Because if they're treated like little toys, if they're treated like playthings, if they're given powers and taken away and, you know, different countries are wiped off the map and everything like that at this kid's will, I think it would make a lot of sense that like a group of these like super high power individuals are like, enough is enough, let's kill this kid. Like, let's kill this god. We decided that the group the party would be derived from could be made up of high level individuals the god created. And while these empires and people have mostly focused on the ground level conflicts of attacking each other in the past, the severity and brutality of the god has worn them down, watching as entire nations are wiped off the map with new ones being created in their place, having most actions being somewhat meaningless because a god can undo them or choose to add something that completely nullifies them, while complexly being aware that actions the god doesn't agree with can lead to instant annihilation. On an individual level, these superhumans have their loved ones murdered just so they can have poorly written and trite tragic backstories. For some, they're forced to commit horrifically evil acts because the god created them to be a villain, but didn't create them with villainous emotions or beliefs, and so on, all leading to a cacophony of issues that has fostered a breaking point where the strongest people in the world have decided to put their differences aside to focus on the true enemy that plagues them, an end goal which would finally free them and allow the world to live autonomously, without fear of being fully reconstructed because of the whims of a child. One question posed by chat, which is entirely reasonable, is how are the party going to be able to kill a god much more powerful than them? And in answering this question, we created a pretty solid framework for an entire campaign. Maybe the players, like the people, it's like they might actually be like have a bit more guile or cunning or whatever, right? Maybe one of them, maybe the god made like the smartest person in the world, so they're actually like way smarter than the god themselves, kind of like humans creating AI which is able to do stuff which we can't do at like a way higher level. So maybe the people are actually like smarter and more capable than the god. In turn, they're able to use that to defeat them, right? Rather than just pure strength, so that maybe they can manipulate them, maybe they can trick them, you know. If they are created, they could be like, we formed a power team to be like the power dynamic, we'll do whatever you want. And the god is like, oh my god, amazing, like all my favorite characters are together, it's a crossover episode, finally, like I've been wanting this so bad, I never thought of it. But really, they're like getting closer to actually kill them. So the god would be defeated by talking, right? I don't think so. I think maybe like that can be an element of how they get close, right? They like are able to have these conversations to like lull the god into a false sense of security or something like that. And that gives them the opportunity to kill them, right? Rather than it being like a diplomatic or conversational death, it's like, no, they have like an actual fight at the end, but like, you know, maybe the players are like, you know what would be awesome? If you gave us like a sword that's able to like destroy celestial beings, even the most powerful celestial beings. Like, I really want to like go around and be this like titanic threat. And the god's like, yeah, that would be great. Unbeknownst to them, they're like creating a weapon that can kill them, you know? Or maybe the mage is like, hey, it would be incredible, like if you gave me the powers to like transport into sort of like celestial aberrant worlds and I can take other people so we can actually connect and talk to other gods so we can be the like god champions of this world. Once again, they're just creating a pathway or giving them the magical abilities so they can actually like connect and get into the same space as the god to initiate the fight. So I think it could be things like that. And the quest could be sort of like a series of acquiring items and skills from this like child's god. And the god's like, I'll give you that power only if you do this like thing that I want you to do. And then they go on these like quests and tasks that the god has sent, and their reward is like all the items and tools and skills that they need to kill the god. I think that could maybe be what it is. And then that still has the same sort of like general trajectory of a regular campaign. This would end up being the structure for the campaign, but it says very little about the individual sessions. I wanted to lean heavily into the god asking the party to act out little playtime games. Oh, I'll give you this like super weapon if you engage in this war. So then like one of the sessions can be like, the party go to war, and they do a war. Or like you could have this like ultimate dungeon where they've just like, I've given you the hardest enemies in the game and you just need to defeat these enemies. And if you can do that, then I'll give you the power that you want. This could give great opportunities for the party to have murderously broken builds or magical items, because the god doesn't care about balance. They just want to see their toys do cool stuff. And might be a great campaign for players who want to flex their game-breaking player creation abilities in a setting that fosters and promotes it. This whole thing is also an awesome chance for the player to try a bunch of different high-level characters, because the god is indifferent to the deaths of these people, while not requiring any continuity from the group they're closely monitoring and designing challenges for. Because to them, the individual people aren't super relevant, it's more the concept of putting their creations through these intense ordeals which they've created for them. You could go so far as to have intended total party kills in the campaign, only for everyone to just continue on the next session with an entirely different squad as if nothing happened. Lastly, this should be a really fun role-playing situation for the DM who is playing a meta version of themselves, one who is specifically meant to be tricked by the party into giving them ridiculously good skills and items, so at the end of the campaign, they can be defeated. Now, obviously, we could just continue to unpack this and discuss all the cool things we could add for this campaign, but I think this is a really solid blueprint to build off, and I'm personally really keen to get my party to go on an adventure like this. I know for a fact they would absolutely froth it. Regardless, I wanted to make this video to share this idea if people are interested, but also mainly to demonstrate how a process like map making, while just riffing on lore for the world, can lead to you creating fun campaign ideas. And that's the video. This world map and the short campaign document which accompanies it are available on my Patreon, along with a ton of other maps and quests. Thanks so much to everyone who has already become a member, genuinely one of the coolest things. Subscribe to the channel for more D&D content, follow the Twitch to help make this stuff with us live. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye!